Europe has built its own house, and now it has to live in it. And it's a house that's going to be free of Russia. Europe is going to sink, crack, collapse. Russia is going to grow and thrive.
Actually, Iran contributed a lot to Russia being able to stand up to the sanctions because Iran had been experiencing maximum pressure sanctions for many years. And as soon as the sanctions began on Russia, we literally saw hundreds of delegations come to Iran from different ministries, from different parts of the state, the private sector. The American society blaming Trump because he initiated this war. So Trump has this extraordinary ability to do exactly the opposite as what Obama was able to do. Obama was able to use his extraordinary soft power capabilities, probably his most effective weapon, to divide and as a result to strengthen the US position. Trump does the exact opposite. He unites his opponents. He unites those he antagonizes, both inside the United States and abroad. And that, I think, is another element that is weakening the United States. So
Iran has linked its national pride, its national honor, its dignity, its sovereignty, everything that a nation uses to define themselves. Iran has linked to their peaceful nuclear program, their nuclear enrichment program, and they simply aren't going to give that up, especially not to Donald Trump and his bluster. So Trump's in a problem right now where, there is a solution, but politically he's blocked the solution. He's demanding complete dismantlement of Iran's program. Iran won't go for that. Therefore, that opens up war, which we can't win unless we use nuclear weapons. Trump is his own worst enemy on this one. He is literally floundering, and it's because of Marco Rubio. I have to say, Mike Waltz, I believe, was working with the Israelis behind the scenes, and he got called out, and Rubio had him fired. I think this is a power play by Rubio because now Rubio is both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, which creates a whole bunch of constitutional issues. But now he is the man running the totality of the foreign policy, national security policy for the United States. And Marco Rubio is incapable of dealing responsibly with Iran. He is the worst possible candidate as a man being the interlocutor between the United States and Iran. The same thing with Russia. He has caused whatever passed for a peace effort to collapse. Marco Rubio is a tool of the Zionists, a tool of Netanyahu, and Trump is a prisoner of these people.
If you go and sit in a taxi and talk about the nuclear negotiations, the taxi driver will say, "This guy is crazy." When I was in China, as I said just last week, one of the extraordinary things is that in this trade war, something that people don't talk about that often is that in China, not only do they have an advantage because they produce goods and the Americans don't, and all that, their population, but also the very fact that Trump initiated this unites the people of China because they're not going to blame their government first when there's hardship. I'm sure they will. Whenever there's hardship, people blame the government for good or for rightly or wrongly. But a lot of the blame will be put on the Americans. The American society,
because he has to emerge from everything he does as the dominant person, as the victor, and everybody else can't be equal. They must be defeated. This is why, now that I can speak freely, Professor Marandi, Iran shouldn't trust this man as far as they can throw him. And I know you know that. But this is a man incapable of entering the kind of deal that would be needed. Obama, at least, had enough humility to say, we have to make a compromise. So he went from no spinning centrifuges to accepting Iran's nuclear enrichment program. That's what we need to do today. We need to back away from our hardline position and make a compromise. This president can't do that because he views that as a humiliation, as a sign of weakness, instead of the sign of greatness that it is. A man great enough to make compromises to bring about peace. He can't make any compromises. And so now he's made the situation much worse. Russia has built a position today post Ukraine conflict where its economy is free from the malign influence of the West's economy, where politically it's not dependent upon sound diplomatic relations with Europe or the United States. It has this strengthened bond with Iran, with China and others. And Russia, I think, would like better relations with the United States. It's smart to have better relations, But even if Russia gets better relations, Russia's not going to undo what it's done. To give you an example, during the early weeks of Trump's outreach to Russia, there was a lot of optimism in Europe that the Russian market could be opening back up. I don't think that's the case anymore because Trump's an idiot.
Although the Iranian military doesn't use the civilian ports, they have their own ports to bring in what they need. If it's for jet fuel or it's rocket fuel or solid fuel or anything, they have their own ports. So that wasn't an issue there. But other fires that we've seen the last two, like a factory for motorcycles, these are just ordinary fires. But that's what Scott says is true. The Israelis are going to push for war in whatever way is possible for them. That's what the Iranian foreign minister, as we've already discussed, has mentioned. Finally, and I'm not privy to anything secret in Iran, I always steer clear of these things. Iranian missiles and Iranian drones, and there are many hundreds of thousands, and there are hundreds of underground bases. They can destroy Israel. There's no doubt about that. They can destroy almost everything is sensitive across in the Persian Gulf and Israel. If you want to fire a missile, let's say at an electrical power plant, you don't have to be that precise. You can fire 10 missiles and that power plant is down. But if you want to knock out a plane or if you want to knock out something small, you need more precision. And I think True Promise 1 and 2 were good opportunities for Iran to see its capabilities, to test the different type of missiles, they can get through, how accurate they are. And I think that right now the Iranians are busy producing a missile defense capability that when it is used, it will do exactly what Scott says it will.
For instance, the Ukraine conflict become a messenger of peace. Now we have more influence with Russia, which means that we can subtly say to Russia, you might want to not do that deal with Iran. And Russia might have listened because they're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars of trade with America. But things, I can't guarantee outcomes. I can't speak on behalf of the Russians. I'm just saying that from an American point of view, there were leverage that we could play. If I were a policy guy, I would say we need to make sure we have as much.
And his father was African. He was of mixed race. He was an excellent speaker. He spoke of change. He beat McCain. And of course, I think the financial crisis in the United States hit at a moment which benefited him, and that helped him to become president. But in any case, that soft power capability that he had coming after Bush made him a problem because people across the world, and including in Iran, they wanted to believe that this guy was really different. And so he was able to use those capabilities, despite all the sinister things that he did, to create division inside Iran, to create division across the region, across the world.
Netanyahu almost immediately responded and said this wasn't true. Now, he has a reason to say that because he doesn't want to admit that he was carrying out behind the scenes discussions with the National Security Advisor that the President of the United States wasn't aware of. And Netanyahu isn't a man known for his ability to adhere to the truth. So I would take Netanyahu's statement with a grain of salt, but I also take the statement of the White House with a grain of salt because the Trump administration is not known for its honesty. What I do believe is happening is that the Trump administration's mouth has written a check that the American body is not prepared to cash. In posturing and threatening military force, we have done a repeat of what Barack Obama did in 2014. If you remember, and Professor Marandi knows as well, in 2012, 2013, Obama was making statements about if Iran, we will not tolerate an Iranian nuclear bomb. If Iran is going to build one, we will use military force. All options are on the table. And then in 2014, when it became clear that Iran wasn't going to be intimidated and to back down, Obama had no choice but to change the American policy from not one spinning centrifuge to not control, but we need to be talking with Iran. We need to make sure that if we make a phone call, Iran picks up on the other end. That alone is an ability to influence. The fact that Iran would be willing to pick up a phone call and listen is a good thing. It's a great thing. We could have done all this and been clever Instead, Donald Trump has just come in and he shot himself in both feet. Then he shot himself in this shoulder and this shoulder. And now he's getting ready to pull the trigger on his head. He has accelerated the demise of the United States. We're not in a position of sustaining maximum growth. He is literally collapsing the empire. Israel, what I'll say is this: Israel can't initiate an attack on Iran by itself that will succeed. Israel is carrying out what I believe they're not false flag, but I think Israel is carrying out a series of covert actions against Iran that are provocative in nature. And the goal is to get Iran to overreact and therefore use that as a justification to strike. I don't know what the facts are about what happened in Bandar Abbas, but according to news reports, these were precursors for solid rocket motor fuel that blew up, and that this could have been done by agents working on behalf of Israel. There's other things happening in Iran. Israel has a history of blowing things up, of taking out, assassinating scientists, assassinating foreign leaders. And I think I am worried about this. I am worried about Israeli provocation. I think the United States has told Israel that it will not tolerate.
And I also think that the Israeli regime is collapsing, but in a different way. I think it will collapse. It will cease to exist in a not so distant future. I'm not speaking about months, but this regime is so widely despised, and it is blind to reality. Regardless of the genocidal nature of the regime, it is blind to the reality that the world is disgusted with it, that the world looks down upon Zionism, that Zionism has turned into a word, if not more ugly, but just as ugly as the word Nazi has been since I was a child. So the United States does not see what everyone else is seeing. The emperor has no clothes, but the emperor seems to think that he still is wearing a silk suit and he's honored across the world. And that's not just Trump. That's not just Trump. That is the whole political establishment of the United States. And I think that's the same is true in its own way in European capitals. And that is what is going to contribute to their downfall more than anything else.
This guy is literally doing everything he can to facilitate the collapse of the United States. And it's not a good time to be an American. I'll tell you that. This is a man who said he wanted to make America great again. He's made America an embarrassment. He's made America a failure. Anything but great. This is, other than the fact that we avoided short-term a nuclear conflict with Russia, this president has achieved nothing positive at all.
Obviously, the United States likes to use the embassy takeover, and they use that as the beginning of history, effectively, like October the 7th, where they use it as the starting point in everything, whereas it began with the Nakba even before then, and decades of oppression against the Palestinians and genocidal attacks and ethnic cleansing has been going on. But they choose that in order to hide the reality.
And suddenly the path to peace is resolve Gaza. Unfortunately, I think we're getting to that point because the United States has boxed itself into this corner, this ridiculous corner where we're empowering Israel to act stupid. How much can Iran take? How many times are you going to allow a port facility to be blown up or an energy place to be blown up or something else to be blown up or somebody to be assassinated before you have to take response? And Iran has built a deterrence strategy or deterrence doctrine that says they will respond. And for Iran to have any credibility, they must respond. And the United States hasn't shown an ability to tell Israel no. If I were the American president, I would be telling Israel no, cease and desist. None of this is happening. But we're given a green light, which tells me that somebody in the United States wants this to happen. And if it does happen, again, I can't speak on behalf of Iran, and I'd be loath to, but I hope they knock the crap out of Israel. I'm not talking about nation destroying. I'm talking about the kind of punch that the guy wakes up in the morning with a broken jaw going, I shouldn't have gotten in the ring with Mike Tyson. Iran is Mike Tyson. They have a knockout punch, and the world doesn't believe it yet. Maybe it's time for Iran to unveil that knockout punch, not in a way that brings about end of the world, but Israel needs to be taught a lesson in humility. And that lesson is you don't have a defense against what Iran has to offer. The war in Ukraine will end, and it will end with a Russian victory, but it's going to end as a war, not as a special military operation. And when Russia makes the decision, I think that decision is going to be made very soon because Russia's not going to sit around now that Trump is actively supporting the Ukrainians, actively working with Europe to expend $800 billion to rearm. They're not going to sit around and let these forces coalesce and elongate this war and bleed Russia to death, which is the objective here. The long, slow death by 1,000 cuts. Russia's in a superior position right now. And I believe that this summer, Russia is going to take some decisive action that's designed to break the back of the Ukraine. And Trump will be humiliated by this. Iran, I don't know. Again, the Iranians have to make decisions. I don't think Iran wants a military war. The fact is, this may come down to Iran having to slap Israel around a little bit and then absorb whatever punishment comes their way. It won't be nuclear, but it'll be conventional. I think Iran is going to have to fight a war with Israel, not to destroy Israel. I would advise the Iranians, do not unleash the totality of your capability.